The adult version of me and the child version of me, they're inseparable. And I've spent my entire life trying to distance myself from the childhood version of me. And that kid deserves a lot of respect. She went through some hell and she survived it. And she was very strong. And so she's not just a memory and a part of my past, she's a part of my present. And she's been a part of the decisions that I've made as an adult, even some that I've regretted. Like, gosh, I'm smarter than this, or I should understand this, or why that's foolish and that doesn't make sense as to why adult me would make that decision. But it's been interesting and very healing for me to recognize that little Amy made some of those decisions, and I need to be kind to her because she doesn't have the information. She didn't have the information that I now have. So she's operating from a place of woundedness and trying to cover those wounds and those scars. So if I can reconcile those two, that conflict that's been within me for a number of years, it calms that and it brings a sense of peace. So it's very formative for us, and it shouldn't be an excuse, but it's something that we need to acknowledge and not try and separate ourselves from. I think for me, that was extremely harmful, and I made some very bad decisions from that place. My mother got married to my biological father when she was 19. 2 years later, when I was 2, she was pregnant with me when they got married. So 2 years later, when I was 2, as the abuse towards her started to transfer more in my direction, and he threw a vacuum sweeper, one of those really big ones from back in the day, the real heavy ones, and it missed my head by about an inch. And my mom decided, for all the death threats and everything that he put her through, she was going to go. From there, she got remarried to my stepdad, but I don't call him my stepdad. He has been my dad from the beginning and to this day, and he's done a bang-up job at that. But when they got married, they had my half-brother, which again, I don't call him my half-brother. That kid is my brother, and he's not even a kid anymore. But he has grown, and he is one of my best friends. My biological father's influence was ever present, even after I was adopted. He led by fear. He broke into every single house, every place that we ever lived, and he made sure that his presence was known, that we knew that no matter where we were, he could get to us anytime in any place. So my brother, from a very different perspective, lived part of that life as well. So very chaotic, very blended, and we tried to normalize dysfunction as best we could to just all get through it. My biological father, he has been in and out of prison my entire life. So that was a good part of the chaos. So for as much as my mom and my stepdad would try to normalize the chaos from the every other weekend visits to the 2 weeks during the summer, that sort of thing, that was very stressful. One of the things that I really give my mom a great deal of credit for is the detox process and the fight. I mean, this woman fought for me, and she fought for my life at risk of her own. What was so challenging is that in going to my father's place every other weekend, it was a game of detox. I mean, he would try to condition me continuously to poison me against her. And I give her so much credit because that woman told me the truth no matter what, even if it made her look bad, at her own expense. And that built so much trust in me, the consistency with telling me the truth, so that I knew no matter what he said, I could come home, I could talk to her about really difficult things, and I knew I could trust the answer because she wasn't trying to self-preserve. She was trying to preserve me and protect me. So that was critical, and that is something that I have seen in other parents as they are struggling with very difficult co-parenting situations, and I've been able to just speak from my experience and say, just hang in there, always tell your kids the truth, be transparent with them, and be consistent. I mean, it was difficult when you have a 6-7-year-old come home that thinks that you're the devil all of a sudden because of what the other parent has tried to say and do. And they come at you with guns a-blazing, and it's very difficult to maintain your composure and meet that kid that is in pain and is afraid and doesn't know who they can trust in that space. And I give my mother great credit because she duked it out with me with great love, And that had to be very difficult for her. I can't imagine how many nights she cried herself to sleep, I'm sure. We started out in survival mode, and she was so invested and has always been so invested in my safety and my success and protecting me, that the transition for me to come into my own and separate and kind of do my own thing and find my way was and has been very challenging. So, and I can see that in some parents. I mean, you spend 20 years almost trying to protect this child from very real things. I mean, we're talking about a felon that has threatened to kill you, that has threatened to run away with your child, and you've had to run scenarios with this kid before she is in kindergarten about if she's kidnapped. Does she know how to dial collect? Does she know how to call 911? Does she know her address? She can't even read, but if she gets kidnapped, how can this kid reach back out and help somebody figure out where she came from, where she is, to get back to safety? So that's an extreme level of your sense of safety is just gone. So me going into adulthood was terrifying for her, and I can't imagine, but that has been a struggle. I mean, I'm almost, I'm in my mid-30s at this point, so now it's, hey Ma, it's okay. You've done a really good job. You can kick back and relax and have some fun and be my friend, because give yourself some credit. I'm here, I didn't die, and we've made it, and I still have my sense of humor intact. So I think we're good. I definitely felt very conflicted as I was growing up. There were two versions of me. There's the version with Mom where I feel like I can be a little bit more myself, but then there's the version with my father that I was told at a very young age, listen, I understand that you're afraid of me, and that's good for you. That keeps you safe. And I took him at his word on that, because there was evidence all over his house from metal cabinets that had been punched in to the extent they'd been punched in for so long they were all rusty, to the toilet paper holder being ripped out of the wall, to all kinds of things. The abuse that I saw that he would take out on the dogs that he would rescue, oddly enough. So it was a very challenging thing. I had to be very, very good. I had to be almost perfect. And the only way that I could find relief from that was to spend time with his mother, my grandmother. That was a little bit safer space. He still had a great deal of control over her, but at least there I could breathe a little. With him, we hardly talked because there was no topic that was really safe. Growing up, it was about a 45-minute drive between my mother's house and my biological father's house. For a kid, that might as well be 4 hours. That was forever. And if I did not get out to that car immediately, I had to be ready 30 minutes prior to him showing up, because he would sometimes fluctuate. He'd be 10, 15 minutes early, or he'd be 10, 15 minutes late. I had to anticipate that. So even as a child, I'm ready 30 minutes early. I am waiting. As soon as I see that car, I'm sitting by the door or the window. And as soon as I see his car, I have to race outside. God forbid my mother hugs me and there's any perfume that is on me, or if she kisses me and God forbid there's a mark from her kissing me innocently, he would throw a fit. Or if I was in any way late by his terms, if she held me up, then it would be him trying to punish her for holding me up, and he would peel out of the driveway, fling stones on all the cars, and drive like a bat out of hell for 45 minutes. And that was scary, especially considering the number of times that his road rage was significant. He used drugs. He used usually Valium to try and keep his anger under control, but there were times it would bleed through, and I remember several times, and I would just blank out and try not to really be present because it was too hard. So I actually taught myself to fall asleep on cue as a kid. That became a survival mechanism that was something that I would do. We'd get in the car, and within 5 minutes, Amy's out. And so it was challenging. We didn't have a whole lot in common, and he made sure that I knew my place, and my place was to be seen and not heard. And I knew, you don't poke that bear. And I think some people can probably relate to this. It sounds terrible to say, but for me, divorce was a mercy. My mother and I would not have survived. He probably would have killed one or both of us. So it was a mercy. It's unfortunate that it happened in the first place, that those circumstances came about in the first place, but things happen. And I think for some kids, it's almost more difficult. I can't imagine what my life would have been like in a home where they tried to make that all better or make that work or survive that. At least that separation, I got some breaks. Did I think it was normal? No. Back when I was going to school and growing up, I think it's more normal now. But in my generation at that particular time, it actually wasn't that normal. So I tried to keep that under wraps because a lot of other kids couldn't relate to that. There was so much shame, I felt like, attached to a good part of who I was. I had to dumb down who I was. I had to cover who I was, because who I really have discovered that I am as I've grown up and found a safe space that wasn't threatening for other people would have been very threatening growing up. And so, for instance, when I would go to my father's house, I had to change my clothes immediately from my mother's clothes. Those were my mother's clothes. They were not my clothes. They were my mother's clothes. So I would have to change and put them in a plastic bag and save them as soon as we'd get ready to go for him to take me back. And that's when I would be able to change back into those clothes. And I had nicer clothes when I was with my mom, and that felt good. So I would have to literally shuck that part of myself as soon as I got there. And the clothes that my father made me wear were, he wouldn't buy me new clothes because I'm a kid, I grow too fast, and for him that was not a good investment. I don't think I ever once had a pair of new shoes from my father. So my clothes were clothes from my grandmother's lost and found. She worked at a school. So she would pick clothes out of the lost and found for me, and I wasn't even in middle school, so most of these things were too big for me, including my shoes. I wore a pair of shoes that were no less than 3 sizes too big for me for at least 3 or 4 years. So I felt like a clown, and I could never feel comfortable. I had glasses since I was growing up. Back in the day, that wasn't cool, but what I found is those were literally a blessing in disguise for me, because as I hit puberty, I started to look more and more like my mother. That was a very, very real problem. For me to start to look like my mother was dangerous, quite frankly. My mother even had told me, and I believe it to this day, I think God blessed me by making me blonde, because everyone in my family is dark except my biological father. So growing up, it helped create a little bit of distance between me looking so much like my mother. Another challenge that I found kind of with my identity, here I'm having to be 2 people between my mother's place and my father's place, but I felt like I was maybe born wrong. And I think there are people that can probably relate to this. I felt like I should have been born a boy. That if I were, and I kind of adopted some of that growing up, where I was a tomboy and I felt more comfortable being a tomboy because at least I wasn't like my mother in terms of my father's perception of me. It felt safer in some ways. So another thing that was kind of an interesting thing with my father is the only thing that we could connect on, where he would connect with me or be proud of me, was if I did really well academically. Then I got to be a little bit of my own person. I almost broke myself in half trying to get those grades, because it was the one area that I felt like he could be proud of me. And no matter how dysfunctional your parents are, you want them to be proud of you, and you seek that approval. I wanted my father to be proud of me, but at the same time, I very much wished that I could just be my stepdad's daughter, that I could just be Amy Hines. I very much wanted to be her, but I couldn't. Legally, I wasn't yet. So simple things like my award ceremony for playing ball. And I was a pretty good ball player back before all the chaos hit, and it was just too much for me. But, so we get the little trophies while we're out there playing softball, and I would want to be announced as Amy Hines, but then I would be looking all over as, is my dad going to show up? And if my father was going to show up, we got to hurry up and tell him, no, go back to my given name. And so it was confusing for other kids, of course, too, just to see that. But, I was desperately wishing for a better life, and there was a lot of strain within me. If you are able to identify the things that happened so that you can heal from them and not make excuses. This isn't about making excuses or blame. In fact, that's the antithesis of what I want to do in my own process and in my own story. But if people can understand their story and know how to tell it in such a way that they can find their own purpose, that we can, we would not be a country that is in so much pain, that has so much conflict, that is so medicated because of anxiety and depression and stress. But from my experience, the things that I'm battling are things that are from generations, and it stops with me. And we have the ability to do that. But if we don't know our story and can't get comfortable with it and grieve it properly, then we don't know how to move forward. And with that, if we can tell our story, to empathize and find the areas in our lives where we do have things in common. We've gotten so good at identifying the ways that we are different. And that is not working out very well for us. I would like to see where we come to a place where we can empathize, where we can sit with another person and just listen. Not for the sake of argument, not for the sake of winning or one-upping. It is their story. Let them tell it. We all have pain, but pain really doesn't mean anything if we don't use it for some sort of progress. And that's my goal, is that we'll use our pain for progress and that the cycle stops with us.